My name is Julian Cole. I am 28 years old. On the exact day I graduated from one of the most prestigious medical schools in the country. I sat in a massive stadium surrounded by over 10,000 cheering families, holding a text message from my mother that made my blood run cold. I looked out across the endless sea of proud parents' bouquets of flowers, handmade signs, people crying, laughing, celebrating. Then I looked down at the front row, at the 4 VIP seats reserved for my family. They were completely empty. My parents, Richard and Elaine Cole, had decided not to come. Not because of an emergency, not because of a delayed flight. They chose not to come. Instead, they flew to the Bahamas with my younger sister, Vanessa, to celebrate her hitting 10,000 followers on her lifestyle social media page. As I sat there suffocating in my heavy doctoral robe, trying to hold myself together while strangers cheered around me, my phone buzzed. A message. From my mother, sent through expensive cruise Wi-Fi. Enjoy your ceremony. Julian, we're by the pool having cocktails. Don't make a big deal out of us not being there. It's not like you're a real doctor yet. You still have residency. I stared at the screen, reading it over and over again. Part of me wanted to cry. Part of me wanted to disappear. But mostly, I felt something familiar. That quiet, numb acceptance. Because for 28 years, I had been swallowing moments like this, excusing them, minimizing them, pretending they didn't hurt. I thought I would do the same thing today. Sit through the ceremony, smile politely, pretend everything was fine. I thought my family would once again get away with making me invisible. But then, the keynote speaker walked onto the stage, Dr. Evelyn Carter, a world-renowned pediatric surgeon, brilliant, respected, and known for having absolutely zero tolerance for nonsense. She stepped up to the podium, looked out at the massive crowd, then looked directly into the broadcast cameras streaming the ceremony live. Slowly, she closed her prepared speech, leaned into the microphone, and said something that made my entire world stop. She said my parents' full names, out loud, on a live broadcast, within seconds. My phone started vibrating uncontrollably. Calls, messages, notifications flooding in. Something had just happened. Something big. And whatever Dr. Carter had just said was about to destroy everything my parents had spent their lives building. Before I tell you what she said and how it shattered their perfect image, take a moment to subscribe if you enjoy powerful, real-life turning points like this, and drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from. Now, let me take you back. Growing up in one of the wealthiest, perfectly polished suburbs of Portland, my family lived by a system that was never spoken out loud, but controlled everything. It was a silent scoreboard. My father, Richard Cole, was a high-level corporate strategist who treated our family like one of his investment portfolios. Time, attention, and affection were not given freely. They were allocated based on return. My mother, Elaine, was just as calculating in her own way. Her entire world revolved around social status, private events, and the ruthless hierarchy of her country club circle. To her, appearances were everything, and in that world, only one person truly mattered: my younger sister, Vanessa. Vanessa was exactly what my parents wanted to present to the world. She had flawless blonde hair, an effortlessly charming personality, and a magnetic presence that drew attention wherever she went. She knew how to laugh at the right moments, pose for the right pictures, and say exactly what people wanted to hear. She wasn't particularly driven. She avoided anything that required real discipline, but none of that mattered in our house, because she was visible, and visibility was everything. Every small thing Vanessa did was treated like a major achievement. Every compliment she received was amplified. Every minor success was celebrated like it was history in the making. I, on the other hand, existed somewhere in the background, quiet, focused, academic, invisible. I stayed out of their social games. I had no interest in impressing strangers or climbing into circles that didn't feel real to me. And for that, I became irrelevant. Let me give you a moment that explains everything. When I was 16 and Vanessa was 14. She entered a local school talent show. She performed a heavily choreographed pop routine. Her singing was slightly off. Her timing wasn't perfect. But she placed third, when they announced her name. My father jumped to his feet in the middle of the auditorium like she had just won a world championship. He was clapping, shouting, completely overwhelmed with pride. The very next night, he rented out the entire back room of one of the most expensive Italian restaurants in the city. There were at least 25 guests, family friends, business partners, people from my mother's social circle. A giant custom cake sat in the center of the room with Vanessa's face printed on it in icing. My father gave a long speech about her natural star power and how she was destined for something extraordinary. Everyone applauded. Everyone admired her. And I sat at the very end of the table, quietly eating my pasta. Not a single person asking me a question. Not one. 2 years later. It was my turn. I had spent every waking moment buried in textbooks, pushing myself beyond exhaustion because I knew one thing with absolute certainty. Education was my only way out. I graduated at the very top of my class, valedictorian, a perfect GPA, flawless test scores, a full academic scholarship to one of the most competitive universities in the country. For once, there was no ambiguity, no room to downplay it, no way to pretend it wasn't significant. During the graduation ceremony, I stood at the podium in front of nearly 2,000 people. My hands were steady, my voice clear. I spoke about resilience, about discipline, about building a future when no one believes in you yet. The crowd applauded. Some people even stood. For a brief moment. I allowed myself to believe that maybe this would be enough, that maybe this time, my parents would finally see me. When the ceremony ended, I walked across the field holding my diploma tightly in my hands. I scanned the crowd until I found them standing near the bleachers. My father was looking down at his phone, scrolling through emails like he was waiting for a meeting to start. My mother was adjusting her sunglasses, barely paying attention to anything around her. I walked toward them, my heart pounding harder with every step. This was the moment. This had to be the moment. But when I reached them, my mother didn't smile. She didn't hug me. She didn't even say congratulations. She let out a small, irritated sigh and said, "Julian, your speech was far too long. You used so many complicated words, it honestly made people lose interest. Next time, try to be a little more engaging, like your sister." I just stood there. Vanessa, who had barely passed her sophomore classes, gave me a small, amused smile. She patted my shoulder like I was a child who had tried her best but missed the point. No celebration followed. No dinner. No recognition. We drove home in silence. That night, I stood alone in the kitchen, eating cold leftovers straight from the fridge while the sound of television laughter echoed from the living room. No one called my name. No one asked how I felt. No one cared. I went upstairs, closed the door to my room, and sat in the dark for a long time. That was the night something inside me finally shifted. I understood, with absolute clarity, that no matter how much I minimized myself, it would never earn their approval. So I stopped trying. Instead, I made a decision. If they refused to see me, then I would become impossible to ignore. I would aim so high that they wouldn't be able to look away, no matter how much they wanted to. That was the moment I chose my path. I was going to become a pediatric surgeon. From that moment on, I stopped looking for encouragement. I replaced it with discipline. I threw myself into my pre-med studies with a level of intensity that bordered on obsession, while other students balanced classes with social lives. I eliminated everything that didn't move me forward. I volunteered at a children's hospital, spending long hours watching doctors work, memorizing every detail, every decision, every moment of care. I joined demanding research labs that pushed me to my limits. My weekends disappeared into stacks of organic chemistry textbooks so dense they felt impossible to conquer. I didn't slow down. I didn't look back. While I was pulling all-nighters in the library, surviving on caffeine and determination, Vanessa made a very different decision. She dropped out of community college after one semester. She said traditional education was limiting her creativity and announced that she was going to become a lifestyle influencer online. My parents didn't question her. They didn't challenge her. They invested in her. They bought her expensive cameras, professional lighting equipment, and entire wardrobes of designer clothes. They paid for everything: her apartment, her car, her daily life. All so she could take carefully curated photos of herself drinking iced coffee in aesthetic cafes. Meanwhile, I worked long, exhausting shifts at a campus coffee shop just to afford basic lab fees. But I told myself it would be worth it, because I had a goal. Getting into a top medical school wasn't just about my future. It was proof. Undeniable proof that I had value, that I mattered. I believed it was the one achievement they wouldn't be able to dismiss. So I endured everything it took to get there. The MCAT, the endless interviews, the constant pressure. And then, one rainy Tuesday afternoon in early spring, everything changed. I was sitting alone in my tiny off-campus apartment when my email notification appeared. I opened it, and there it was. An official acceptance letter from one of the top 5 medical programs in the country. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Then I dropped to my knees on the floor and cried. Not quiet tears, not controlled tears. Real, overwhelming tears of relief. Every sleepless night, every sacrifice, every moment of doubt. It had all led to this. I printed the letter on thick, clean paper like it was something sacred. I went out and bought a bottle of wine with the last $20 I had, and I drove straight to my parents' house for Sunday dinner. I walked through the front door and smelled the familiar scent of my mother's cooking. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to feel something dangerous. Hope. I truly believed this was going to be the moment everything changed. That they would finally see me. That they would finally recognize what I had become. I waited until we were all seated at the long mahogany dining table. My hands were shaking slightly as I slid the acceptance letter across the polished surface toward my father. My heart was pounding so loudly I could hear it in my ears. I was waiting for him to smile, to stand up, to say he was proud. Instead, the moment that followed would almost destroy everything I had just fought so hard to build. The room felt heavy. The smell of roasted meat and wine filled the air. My father sat at the head of the table, slicing his food with the same cold precision he used in his business dealings. My mother was casually talking about someone at her country club who had worn the wrong outfit to a charity event, and I sat there, waiting. Vanessa barely looked up from her phone the entire time. Her fingers moved quickly across the screen, typing, scrolling, pausing only to sigh dramatically as if she were handling something incredibly important. When the plates were finally cleared, I reached into my bag and pulled out the folder. It was clean, cream-colored, perfect. Inside was everything: my acceptance letter, my future. The financial aid documents that stood between me and everything I had worked for. I took a slow breath to steady my hands and slid the folder across the table until it stopped beside my father's wine glass. Medical school wasn't just difficult to get into. It was almost impossibly expensive, even with the academic support I had fought for. The remaining costs were overwhelming. Tuition, housing, textbooks, lab fees. It all added up to a number I couldn't reach alone. I was 22. I had spent my entire adult life studying and working low-paying jobs just to survive. I didn't have the credit history needed to secure those loans on my own. I needed a cosigner. That was it. I wasn't asking them to pay for anything. I wasn't asking for money. I was asking for access, for a signature, for the smallest form of support that would allow me to move forward legally. My father looked down at the folder. He didn't open it. He didn't touch it. He just stared at the embossed logo on the cover like it was something distant and unimportant. Then he picked up his napkin, wiped his mouth slowly, and looked at me. His expression was cold, measured. "What exactly is this?" "Julian," he asked. "It's my acceptance letter," I said, unable to hide the smile breaking across my face. "I got into one of the top medical programs in the country. I'm going to specialize in pediatric surgery." I pointed lightly at the folder. "The documents behind it are for federal and private loans. I just need you to co-sign them so I can secure funding before the semester starts." Silence filled the room. I waited. I waited for surprise, for pride, for something, anything. But instead, my father reached forward with one finger and pushed the folder back toward me. He never even opened it. It slid across the table and stopped right in front of me. "We can't take on that kind of financial liability, Julian," he said calmly, like he was reviewing a failed proposal. "Your mother and I have gone over our finances carefully. This is too much risk for us right now." For a moment, I thought I had misunderstood him. "You'll need to delay your enrollment," he continued, "or consider a more affordable career path." My mind went blank. "Risk," I repeated, my voice breaking slightly. "Dad, this isn't a risk. I'm going to be a doctor. I'll repay every cent of those loans myself. I just need your signature to get started." I leaned forward, my hands tightening against the table. "If I don't secure this funding, I lose my place. I lose everything I've worked for." My mother let out a long, irritated sigh and slowly swirled the wine in her glass. "Lower your voice, Julian," she said sharply. "You're being incredibly selfish right now. You only think about yourself and your expensive little academic plans." At that moment, I was seriously thinking about walking away from that table and cutting them off completely right then and there. If you were in my position, after everything they said and did, would you have done the same? If you agree with that choice, drop a 1 in the comments. I really want to know. You need to understand that this family has other priorities right now. I stared at my mother, certain I had misheard her. "Other priorities," I repeated slowly. "What could possibly be more important than your daughter getting into one of the best medical schools in the country?" That was the moment Vanessa finally looked up from her phone. She smiled at me, not kindly, not proudly, condescendingly. "Well, since you asked," she said lightly, flipping her hair over her shoulder. "I'm launching my lifestyle and wellness brand next month. It's going to be huge. I'll be selling curated home pieces, supplements, all of it to my audience. Mom and Dad are backing me as primary investors." My father straightened slightly, clearly pleased. "That's correct," he added. "We've restructured some of our assets to provide Vanessa with the $50,000 capital she needs to launch properly. Building a business requires serious upfront investment. Julian, we're positioning her for long-term success." My mother nodded in agreement. completely satisfied with the explanation. So our credit and finances are fully committed right now, she said. We can't take on anything else. For a second, I couldn't move. The air in the room felt thin, like something had been sucked out of it. They were sitting there so calmly, so confidently, as if what they were saying made perfect sense. They were willing to hand Vanessa $50,000 in cash for a business that didn't even exist yet. But they refused to sign a piece of paper that would allow me to become a doctor. They were funding her illusion, while calling my future a liability. And in that moment, I finally understood. This had never been about money. It was about control. About making sure I never became something they couldn't ignore. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. I simply reached forward, picked up the folder, and placed it back into my bag. I understand, I said quietly. My voice didn't even sound like my own. I understand exactly where I stand in this family. No one stopped me as I stood up. No one called my name. I walked out of that house and didn't look back. And for the first time in my life, I knew the truth. I was completely on my own. No support, no safety net, no family. If I wanted this life, I would have to fight for every inch of it alone. The next morning, I went straight to the financial aid office. And I did what thousands of desperate students are forced to do every year. I signed my name on high-interest private loans that didn't require a cosigner. The interest rates were brutal. Every signature I placed on those documents felt like I was handing over pieces of my future to the banks. But I didn't hesitate. I didn't have the luxury of hesitation. I needed that seat. I needed that future. The loans covered tuition, nothing more. No rent, no textbooks, no lab equipment, no food. So I found another way to survive. I applied for a job as an overnight emergency medical technician, and for the next 2 years, my life became a test of endurance that I wasn't sure any human was meant to pass, while my classmates spent their weekends traveling, relaxing, or studying in expensive apartments paid for by their families. I lived in a constant state of exhaustion that never really went away. My alarm went off at 6 in the morning. I sat through lectures, labs, and clinical simulations until late afternoon, forcing my brain to absorb information even when it felt like it was shutting down. Then I would rush back to my tiny apartment, collapse for 3 hours of sleep, and wake up in the dark. By 8:30 at night, I was pulling on my EMT uniform, lacing up heavy boots, and stepping into a completely different world. From 9 at night until 5 in the morning. I worked on an ambulance. I saw everything. Car accidents that twisted metal into unrecognizable shapes, violent injuries, people at their worst, their most fragile, their most desperate. My clothes carried the smell of antiseptic, sweat, and stale coffee. During the rare moments when the radio went quiet, I sat in the back of that freezing ambulance under flickering lights, flipping through flashcards with shaking hands. Organic chemistry, anatomy, pharmacology. I survived on vending machine coffee and pure adrenaline. I lost weight. Dark circles settled permanently under my eyes. I stopped existing outside of work and school. I didn't have time to make friends. I didn't have money to keep up with anyone even if I did. I became something in between. Not fully a student, not fully a person. Just something moving forward because it had to. There were nights I stood under the hot water in the shower after a shift, letting it run over me while I tried to stay standing. Sometimes I cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly, because I was too tired to do anything else. And every time the thought crossed my mind to quit, to call my father, to admit I couldn't do this alone, I remembered his face, calm, dismissive, certain. I remembered Vanessa smiling while talking about her boutique, and that anger kept me going. One more day, one more shift, one more exam, until finally, my body reached its limit. It was the winter of my second year, 4 in the morning. We had just dropped off a critical trauma patient at the largest teaching hospital in the region. My uniform was soaked with sweat. My hands were still shaking from the adrenaline crash, and in less than 4 hours, I had a major pharmacology exam. I could barely see straight. I stumbled into a surgical break room, a quiet space usually reserved for senior physicians. I didn't belong there, but I didn't care. I just needed 10 minutes. I sat down, opened my textbook, and tried to focus on the words in front of me. Cellular pathways, mechanisms, details I had studied 100 times, but my body gave out. My head dropped forward onto the pages, and I was gone. I don't know how long I was asleep, but I woke up suddenly, not from noise, from presence. Someone was standing over me. I sat up quickly, panic hitting me all at once. I thought I was about to be reported, written up, removed from the program before I even had a chance. I rubbed my eyes and looked up, and everything inside me went still. Standing across the table, holding a cup of black coffee, watching me with an intense, unblinking gaze, was Dr. Evelyn Carter, the most feared and respected surgeon in the entire hospital, and in that moment, I had no idea. That meeting her was about to change everything. I stared up at her, completely frozen. Dr. Evelyn Carter. If you've never heard her name, you wouldn't understand the weight of that moment. She wasn't just respected, she was legendary. The head of pediatric surgery, the kind of surgeon whose research we studied, whose techniques we memorized, whose name carried authority in every hospital corridor. She had written the very textbooks I was trying to learn from, and she had a reputation that was just as sharp as her mind. She did not tolerate mistakes. She did not tolerate weakness. Residents feared her. Attendings respected her. No one questioned her. And right now, she was standing over me while I had just been sleeping on a textbook in a room I wasn't even supposed to be in. I shot up from the chair so fast I nearly knocked the table over. My heart was pounding so hard it hurt. "I'm so sorry, Dr. Carter," I said quickly, my voice unsteady. "I just finished a transport and I have an exam in a few hours. I only sat down for a minute. I'll leave right now." She didn't respond. She didn't raise her voice. She simply lowered her coffee slightly and looked down at the open textbook in front of me. Then she pointed to the page. "Explain the cellular pathway and mechanism of action for a beta-1 adrenergic receptor antagonist in a pediatric patient with tachycardia." Her voice was calm, but there was no room for hesitation in it. For a fraction of a second, my mind went completely blank. All I could feel was fear. But then something else took over. Muscle memory. All those nights in the ambulance. All those hours studying in exhaustion. I took a breath and started speaking. I explained the receptor binding, the reduction in cyclic AMP, the downstream effects on calcium channels, the decrease in heart rate through negative chronotropic action. The words came faster, clearer, stronger. I didn't stop. Not for 2 full minutes. When I finished, the room went silent. I stood there, waiting for her to dismiss me, to tell me I didn't belong there, that I had crossed a line. Instead, something unexpected happened. The smallest hint of a smile touched the corner of her mouth. She studied me, really studied me, my worn uniform, the exhaustion in my eyes, the way I was still trying to stand upright despite everything. "Why is a second-year medical student working full-time overnight shifts?" she asked. I didn't hesitate. "Because I have to," I said simply. I didn't explain my family. I didn't justify anything. I just told the truth. I don't have a cosigner for my loans. I'm covering everything myself. The ambulance job pays for my rent and my books. She didn't interrupt. She just watched me. For a long moment. She said nothing. Then she gave a small, decisive nod. Be in my office. 7th floor. 3 o'clock this afternoon. She said, do not be late. And just like that, she turned and walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, completely stunned. I barely remember the rest of that morning. I took my pharmacology exam a few hours later and scored a 98. But my mind kept going back to that moment, to her voice, to that instruction, at exactly 2:58 that afternoon. I stood outside her office door, dressed in the most professional clothes I owned. I knocked. Come in, she said. I stepped inside. She was seated behind a large glass desk, surrounded by awards, framed publications, and years of achievement that filled the room with quiet authority. She gestured for me to sit. She folded her hands neatly on the desk and looked directly at me. I reviewed your academic file this morning, Julian, she said calmly. You are currently ranked third in your class. Your professors describe you as exceptionally capable, but completely disconnected from your peers because you are always working. Your clinical performance is nearly flawless, but physically, you are deteriorating. Her gaze sharpened slightly. I can see the exhaustion. If you continue like this, you will burn out before you ever reach residency, and that would be an enormous waste of your ability. I looked down at my hands, suddenly unable to hold her eye contact. I know, I said quietly, but I don't have a choice. You do now, she replied without hesitation. The words made me look up. She leaned back slightly in her chair, completely composed. I am leading a large-scale clinical research project on congenital heart defects, she continued. I need someone who can manage complex data, think critically, and handle pressure. Someone who is not afraid of hard work. She paused for just a moment. I'm offering you the position. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The role comes with a substantial stipend, she added. It pays more than double what you're earning now. The hours are flexible. You will work around your academic schedule, not against it. Then she said it plainly. I want you to resign from the ambulance position today. I sat there, completely still, trying to understand what was happening. My own parents had refused to sign a single document to help me move forward. They had chosen to invest in Vanessa's idea instead of my future. And now, a stranger, a woman who owed me nothing, was offering me a way out. The weight of it hit me all at once. I covered my face with my hands, and I broke. The exhaustion, the fear, the pressure I had been carrying for years. It all came out at once. I couldn't stop the tears. I wasn't crying just because of relief. I was crying because, for the first time, someone had seen me. Doctor. Carter didn't interrupt. She simply reached across the desk and placed a box of tissues in front of me. Her voice softened. Just slightly. Take the weekend, she said. Rest. I expect you in the research lab on Monday morning. That moment changed everything. I left the ambulance job. I started working under Dr. Carter. And over the next 2 years, she became something far beyond a supervisor. She became the person I had been missing my entire life. She challenged me relentlessly, pushing me to think faster, deeper, sharper. But she also paid attention in ways that mattered. If I forgot to eat, food would appear on my desk. If I succeeded, she acknowledged it, not with empty praise, but with genuine respect. She treated my ambition like it had value, like it deserved to exist, without the constant pressure of survival. Everything changed. My performance improved. Then it accelerated. I moved from third in my class to first. By my final year, I was no longer just doing well. I was leading. I secured a competitive pediatric surgical residency at one of the most respected hospitals on the West Coast. I built friendships with people who supported me, who understood the work, who respected the effort it took to get there. For the first time in my life, I had something that felt real, a life I was proud of, a place where I belonged. But even then, even after everything, there was still a part of me that hadn't healed. A small, quiet part that still wanted something I had never received. I wanted my father to look at me with pride, the way he had looked at Vanessa. I wanted my mother to talk about me the way she talked about everything that made her look good, and I convinced myself of something dangerous. That if they could just see me now, if they could just watch me walk across that stage as the top graduate, they would finally understand. I really believed this was going to be the moment everything changed. For weeks, I held on to that thought like it was something fragile and rare, something I had waited my entire life for. Graduation was approaching in late May. As the valedictorian of my medical school class, I had been given 4 VIP front row tickets to the hooding ceremony in the massive university stadium. 4 seats. Reserved, important, family seats. I remember sitting alone in my apartment, holding those glossy tickets in my hands, turning them over slowly, staring at them longer than I probably should have. I kept asking myself the same question over and over again. Who deserves to sit there? My friends had already told me what to do. They said I should give the tickets to people who had actually been there for me, the ones who stayed up with me during exam weeks, the ones who brought me food when I forgot to eat, the ones who never once made me feel like I had to earn their support. Dr. Carter had been even more direct. Protect your peace. Julian, she told me. You don't owe anyone a front row seat in your life. She wasn't wrong. But there was still a part of me that refused to let go. Because no matter how much I had grown, no matter how successful I had become, there was still a small, stubborn part of me that wanted one thing: my parents' approval. And that kind of hope is hard to kill. So I made a decision. I went out and bought a beautiful card, the kind that felt expensive and meaningful, something that looked like it mattered. I placed all 4 tickets carefully inside, then I sat down and wrote them a letter. Not a short one, a real one. I told them everything, about my residency placement, about finishing at the top of my class, about how hard the last few years had been. And then, despite everything that had happened between us, I wrote the part I probably shouldn't have. I told them I still wanted them there, that I wanted them to be part of the most important day of my life. I mailed the package to their house in Portland, and then I waited. The first day passed quietly, then the second, then the third. By the end of the week, there was still nothing. No phone call, no text message, not even a simple acknowledgement that they had received it. I told myself they were busy, that they were making arrangements, that maybe they were planning something bigger than I expected. I convinced myself of every possible explanation that didn't involve the truth, because the truth was harder to accept. Then, exactly 10 days before my graduation ceremony, my phone rang. It was my mother. The moment I heard her voice, something inside me shifted. She sounded excited, bright, energetic, almost happy. "Julian," she said quickly, "we got your invitation in the mail." My heart started racing. "Listen," she continued, "your father and I are flying you back home this weekend. We're hosting a family dinner at the country club on Saturday night, and your attendance is absolutely mandatory." For a moment, I couldn't speak. My chest tightened so suddenly it almost hurt. They were doing something for me. They were planning something. A family dinner. At the country club, I could already picture it in my mind. The decorations, the speeches, my parents finally introducing me with pride. After 26 years of being overlooked, I was finally going to be seen. My hands were shaking as I hung up the phone. I didn't question it. I didn't hesitate. I booked the flight that same night. I packed a dress that made me feel confident. Something simple but elegant. Something that felt like the version of myself I had worked so hard to become. And I flew home. The entire flight from California to Oregon. I replayed the same thoughts in my head over and over again. I imagined my father standing up, placing his hand on my shoulder, calling me doctor for the first time. I imagined my mother telling everyone about my residency, about my accomplishments, about how proud she was. I imagined laughter, celebration, recognition. I imagined what it would feel like to finally belong by the time the plane landed. I had built an entire version of reality in my mind, and I believed it. Saturday night. I arrived at the country club. The building looked exactly the same as it always had. Polished, expensive, immaculate. I walked toward the private dining room, my heels echoing softly against the floor, with every step. My heart beat faster. This was it. This was the moment everything would finally shift. I reached for the door, took a breath, and pushed it open. What I saw on the other side didn't make sense. There were no banners, no congratulations, no mention of graduation anywhere in the room. Instead, the first thing I noticed were the balloons. Large, silver, floating near the ceiling. They were impossible to miss, because they spelled out one number, 10,000. I stood there in the doorway, completely still, staring at them, trying to understand what I was looking at, trying to understand why. None of this had anything to do with me. The room was filled with familiar faces, family, friends, and my parents' carefully curated circle gathered around, laughing and celebrating. My mother directed staff with precision. My father entertained his business partners, and at the center stood Vanessa, radiant, admired, and surrounded by attention. I paused at the entrance, confused by the large silver balloons overhead. 10,000. The number meant nothing to me. Slowly, I stepped inside, trying to understand, when I asked my aunt what we were celebrating. Her cheerful answer hit me instantly. Vanessa had reached 10,000 followers online, and this entire event was for her. The realization wasn't gradual. It was immediate and heavy. My parents knew about my graduation. They had read my letter. They understood everything I had achieved. Yet they brought me here not to celebrate me, but to sit quietly while my sister was praised for something trivial in comparison. I looked at them across the room, smiling, proud, completely absorbed in her moment. That's when I understood the truth. I wasn't the reason for this gathering. I was just part of the background. I took my seat at the far end of the table and said nothing. Dinner unfolded with elegance, expensive food, flowing wine, effortless conversation. Every topic revolved around Vanessa, her image, her content, her growing brand. No one asked me about medical school. No one mentioned my graduation. It was as if I didn't exist, because they had made sure I didn't. They hadn't told anyone why I was there. They had erased my story before I even walked into the room. When dessert arrived, my mother stood and called for attention. The room fell silent. She spoke with pride, her voice confident, her eyes fixed on Vanessa. She praised her dedication, her effort, her success. Then she made the announcement. To celebrate this milestone, they had booked a 10-day luxury cruise for the three of them. My mind stopped. Thursday. They were leaving Thursday. My graduation was Friday. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly across the floor. The room fell quiet as every eye turned toward me. I spoke slowly, barely recognizing my own voice. You're leaving on Thursday. My graduation is Friday. You have the tickets. My father sighed, as if I were being unreasonable. Don't make this about yourself, he said calmly. He explained they had to choose. Vanessa needed this opportunity. The timing worked for her. That was enough. Something inside me broke. You're not coming, I said. It wasn't a question. You're skipping my graduation. The one I worked for. The one I paid for myself. My voice dropped. You're skipping it so she can take pictures on a beach. Vanessa rolled her eyes. Dismissive. It's just a ceremony, she said. You're overreacting. My father agreed. It was just a formality. They would celebrate later. Then he told me to sit down. No one spoke up for me. No one questioned them. No one defended me. And in that silence, everything became clear. Nothing I did would ever be enough. Not even this. The hope I had carried for years didn't fade. It ended. Right there. I stood still for a moment, then quietly said, I hope you enjoy your trip. No anger, no tears, just emptiness. Then I walked out. I left the noise, the illusion, and everything they represented behind. I took a taxi to the airport, changed my flight, and left that same night. Alone, but finally, free. I didn't speak to them after that night. No calls, no messages, nothing. I shut everything down and focused on one thing: graduation. A week later, I sat in the front row of a packed stadium. Thousands of families filled the stands, cheering, laughing, celebrating. The air was full of pride, and I was alone. The 4 VIP seats beside me were empty, untouched, a quiet reminder of exactly what I meant to them. The ceremony began, but I barely listened. Then my phone buzzed. A message from my mother. Enjoy your ceremony. We're by the pool. Don't be dramatic about us missing it. Then the line that stayed with me, you're not really a doctor yet. You still have residency. Vanessa says hi. I stared at the screen. They didn't just stay away. They needed to make sure I felt small. I locked my phone, closed my eyes, and took a breath. I told myself I wouldn't cry. I would get through this, walk the stage, and move on, quietly. But I had forgotten something: the keynote speaker. The dean stepped forward and introduced her. Dr. Evelyn Carter. The stadium erupted in applause. I opened my eyes as she walked onto the stage calm, confident, unshakable. She carried a prepared speech, something polished and expected. She reached the podium, adjusted the microphone, and the cameras zoomed in. Then she paused. She looked down at her notes and stopped. Slowly, she lifted her head and scanned the front row. Her eyes found me, then the empty seats beside me, and in that moment, something shifted. Her expression hardened. Not confusion, anger. She closed her portfolio and set it aside. Then she leaned into the microphone, looking directly into the camera as if speaking beyond the stadium. The noise faded. 10,000 people fell silent, all watching, all listening, and I realized whatever she was about to say was going to change everything. Her eyes moved from the crowd to me, then to the 4 empty seats beside me. I saw it instantly. Not confusion, anger, real, controlled anger. She closed her portfolio slowly and pushed it aside, abandoning her prepared speech. Then she leaned forward, gripping the podium, and looked straight into the camera. I prepared a speech for today, she began, her voice calm but powerful, about the future of medicine, about responsibility, innovation, and progress. She paused, but that would ignore reality. A shift moved through the stage behind her. Even the dean looked uneasy. This wasn't planned, but no one stopped her. Today, she continued, sharper now, I want to talk about sacrifice. The stadium fell completely silent. We see medical graduates and think of success. Perfect scores, prestige. She leaned forward slightly, but we don't see the cost, the scars, the battles behind those seats. My chest tightened. Something told me this mattered. I want to tell you about one student, she said, sitting in the front row today. My heart stopped. She told my story, accepted on merit, earned her place, only needing one thing, a signature. Not money, she said, just a cosign. Silence deepened, but her parents refused. A ripple moved through the crowd. They called her a financial liability. They chose instead to invest $50,000 into their younger daughter's online business. Gasps, whispers, shock spreading row by row. I couldn't move. She was saying it, out loud. Because of that decision, she continued, this student had to take high-interest loans just to stay in school. Her voice grew stronger. And that wasn't enough. She still had to survive. The entire stadium leaned in. So while others rested, she worked full-time overnight as an EMT. Her words cut through the silence. From 9 at night to 5 in the morning. Trauma, emergencies, situations most never face. A pause. Then at 8 in the morning, she walked into class and scored perfectly. No one moved. She slept 3 hours a night, lived on whatever she could afford, pushed herself beyond human limits. Another pause. She nearly broke, because the people meant to protect her decided she wasn't worth a signature. I couldn't feel my hands anymore. Every word landed like weight on my chest. My story, finally spoken. Tears filled my eyes before I could stop them. I covered my mouth, shaking, as everything I had buried came rushing back. But she wasn't done. Her voice softened slightly. She was too brilliant to ignore. She said, I brought her into my research program, and I watched her become one of the most exceptional minds I've seen in over 20 years. She didn't look away. She rose from nothing to become the top student in this graduating class. The words echoed across the stadium. She earned every part of this degree, every inch. With her own strength, she paused again, letting it settle. Then her expression hardened. You would think, she said quietly, that a family would move heaven and earth to be here today. Silence. You would think they would be sitting in those front row seats, proud. Her eyes shifted to the empty chairs beside me. But they are not. The silence settled heavily over the stadium. Then her expression hardened. You would think, she said quietly, her voice carrying everywhere, that a family would do anything to be here today. No one moved. No one spoke. You would think they would be sitting in those front row seats, proud. Her eyes shifted to the empty chairs beside me, but they are not. The words hit hard. The 4 VIP seats for this valedictorian are completely empty. Cameras turned. The massive lens focused directly on my section. Everyone was watching. Do you want to know why, she asked? Then she pointed at the camera. Because Richard and Elaine Cole chose not to come. A wave of shock spread instantly. They said this ceremony wasn't important. Her voice sharpened. Instead, they took their younger daughter on a luxury vacation to celebrate her reaching 10,000 followers online. The reaction exploded. Gasps, murmurs, disbelief. Some people shook their heads. Others whispered. A few openly booed. Even the faculty looked stunned. But she kept going. She turned and pointed at me. The giant screens lit up. My face appeared, tears streaming. No hiding. That student is right there, she said. Dr. Julian Cole. Every head turned. Thousands of eyes on me. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Dr. Cole, she continued. Your family may not be here. Her voice softened. But look around you. I lifted my head. She was smiling. Not polite, not distant. Proud. The medical community is your family now, she said. We see your strength. We see your sacrifice. And we know your worth. Her voice rose. And we are proud to call you our colleague. Then she faced the crowd. Please stand, she said, and show her the respect she deserves. For a second, nothing happened. Then she started clapping. The dean stood. Then the faculty. Then the students. Row by row, until the entire stadium stood. 10,000 people stood at once. The sound hit me like a wave. Loud, overwhelming, endless. It filled the entire stadium, crashing over me, shaking something deep inside my chest. For the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. This wasn't polite applause. It was real. People were clapping for me with emotion, with meaning. The students beside me leaned in, patting my back, calling my name like they had always known it. I stood up slowly. My legs felt weak, unsteady. My whole body was trembling. I looked up at the massive screen above the field, and I saw myself. My face, my tears, raw, unfiltered, impossible to hide. For 28 years, I had been made to feel small, ignored, dismissed, but in that moment, there was nowhere to hide. I was seen, completely, by everyone, 10,000 people, standing, recognizing something my own family never did. And suddenly, it was clear. I had made it, not because of them, but despite them. Everything I built, every sacrifice, every sleepless night was real, and no one could take that away from me. The applause kept going, echoing like a heartbeat that refused to stop. I stayed there, trying to hold on to it, because I knew moments like this don't come twice. Then slowly, the sound faded. People sat down. The ceremony continued. But nothing felt the same. Something had shifted. Permanently. I sat back down, still catching my breath. My hands were shaking. I reached into my pocket for a tissue. My fingers touched my phone. It felt warm. Too warm. I pulled it out. The screen lit up. Notifications everywhere. Missed calls. Messages. Endless. They kept coming. Faster than I could read. Family members. Old contacts. Unknown numbers. All trying to reach me at once. My phone wouldn't stop vibrating. And in that moment, I understood something else. What happened on that stage was no longer just my story. It had become something much bigger. My heart stuttered. 47 missed calls. Over 200 unread messages. My phone was vibrating nonstop. Almost too hot to hold. I unlocked it, my hands still shaking, and opened my messages. The broadcast hadn't stayed inside the stadium. The moment Dr. Carter spoke, it spread, clipped, shared, reposted everywhere. Within minutes, it had reached my extended family, my father's corporate circle, and my mother's country club network. The fallout had already begun, and my parents were still on that cruise, completely unaware their carefully crafted image was collapsing in real time. I stared at the screen as notifications kept pouring in faster than I could read them. My apps were flooding, messages stacking endlessly. I opened the first one. It was from my aunt. A long block of text, all in capital letters. Julian. Please tell me this isn't real. Please tell me your mother didn't actually skip your graduation for a vacation. She told everyone last week that attendance was restricted. She said you asked them not to come. She said it was just a formality. Did they really refuse to help you so Vanessa could start that business? We're all watching this right now. Everyone is shocked. Call me immediately. I read it twice, then a third time. And finally, it sank in. They hadn't just abandoned me. They had lied. They had built an entire story to protect themselves, to make it look like they were supportive, respectful parents, while quietly choosing something else. For years, I thought they ignored me, but this was different. This was deliberate, calculated, and now, everyone knew. I left my aunt's message and opened the family group chat. It was chaos. Messages flooding in, accusations, anger. Uncle Robert had shared the video. I can't believe we're related to people who treat their own daughter like this. 50,000 for a fake business. But you let Julian work overnight on an ambulance. Others joined in. My cousins called Vanessa spoiled. Relatives who had praised her just days ago were now demanding answers. No one was defending my parents. But it didn't stop there. My father's world was collapsing too. I opened a professional network app. The video was already circulating there, posted by doctors talking about financial barriers in medical education. And then I saw it. A comment from one of my father's biggest clients. Is this the same Richard Cole? If so, we will be reviewing our contracts. Integrity starts at home. I stared at the screen. His reputation, his entire career, everything he had built for decades, was unraveling in real time, and he was stuck on a boat, far from it, unable to control any of it. Time passed. The ceremony ended. Families flooded the field, taking photos, celebrating. I stood near the stage, holding my diploma, watching it all from a distance. Then my phone buzzed again. A different tone. I looked down. Messages from my mother, one after another. I opened them. There was no apology, no regret, only panic. Julian, what did you do? Your father's phone is blowing up. Clients are calling. People are questioning us. Aunt Sarah is attacking me in the group chat. How could you embarrass us like this? The messages kept coming. You need to fix this. Go online and say Dr. Carter lied. Tell everyone we supported you. Say you didn't want us there. Then the last one. Do this now, or your father will cut you off completely. I stood there in the sunlight, reading every word. And for the first time, I didn't feel hurt. I felt nothing. 10 years ago, a message like that would have shattered me. I would have apologized, blamed myself, done anything to restore peace. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I had survived the nights on the ambulance, the exhaustion, the pressure. I had earned my place. I opened my garment bag and pulled out my white coat. Clean, crisp, heavy in my hands. I slipped it on slowly. Then I looked down. Dr. Julian Cole, MD, Department of Pediatric Surgery. The words felt real, final. I glanced back at my mother's messages. I didn't feel anger, only pity. They were so trapped in appearances that they couldn't even see what they had lost. I didn't reply, not a single word. I opened her contact, scrolled down, blocked. Then my father, blocked. Then Vanessa, blocked. I moved through everything. Messages, email, social media, every connection, gone, clean, permanent. I put my phone back into my pocket and took a slow breath. For the first time in my life, my chest felt light. No pressure, no expectation, no need to prove anything. I walked out of that stadium alone, but I had never felt stronger. That day was the beginning of something new. I left everything behind. I changed my last name, cutting the final tie to my father's world. I moved across the country to begin my surgical residency at one of the top children's hospitals, and I gave everything to my work. I chose one of the hardest paths: pediatric cardiothoracic surgery, long hours, high risk, no room for error. I spent my days operating on infants, holding fragile hearts in my hands, giving them a second chance at life. Years passed. I built a reputation that no one could question. I became one of the youngest attending surgeons in my department, published research, earned respect, built a life on my own terms. I bought a home by the ocean. I built friendships that felt real, supportive, honest, unconditional. A family I chose, and through all of it, I never looked back. No calls, no messages, no contact. They no longer had a place in my life. I never unblocked them. I never checked their lives again. They faded into something distant, a memory I chose not to revisit. Sometimes, through a cousin who had also stepped away, I heard fragments of what happened after. The video had destroyed my father's reputation. Clients walked away. Contracts disappeared. His consulting firm shrank, and with it, their lifestyle. Vanessa's career collapsed just as quickly. Her followers lost interest. The boutique failed within a year, burning through the $50,000 they had once prioritized over my future. She married someone just like her, unstable, directionless. They ended up living back in my parents' house, dependent on what little remained. Everything they built unraveled, and I stayed far away from it, free. For years, nothing changed, until it did. 5 years after my graduation, Vanessa had a baby girl, and within days, the doctors found something serious: a rare congenital heart defect, severe, complex, life-threatening. Local surgeons refused to operate. They said only one specialized team on the West Coast could handle it. An emergency transfer was arranged. My parents and Vanessa rushed onto a plane, desperate, terrified. They were flying to my hospital. They didn't know. Not my name. Not my face. Because the surgeon they were depending on was me, under a different name, Dr. Julian Hayes. In my world, everything was precise, controlled. The pediatric cardiac unit didn't allow mistakes. Every decision mattered. Every movement carried weight. By my 5th year as an attending surgeon, I had mastered that world. To my colleagues, I was focused, capable, reliable. They didn't know anything about where I came from. I had built my life carefully, a barrier between past and present, and I believed it would stay that way. Until one morning, cold, rain falling steadily outside. I was in my office reviewing scans when my phone rang. It was intake. A neonatal emergency flight was arriving from Seattle. Newborn, 48 hours old, critical condition. The diagnosis came next: transposition of the great arteries. The main vessels of the heart reversed. Oxygen wasn't reaching the body. Without immediate surgery, the child wouldn't survive. I went still, because I already knew who was on that plane. The condition was fatal without immediate surgery. Local surgeons had already refused. Only one team could handle it. Mine. The baby was 10 minutes out. The family was already waiting upstairs. I opened the file. Name baby girl Cole. Mother Vanessa Cole. Next of kin: Richard and Elaine Cole. I stopped breathing. It was them. 5 years later, they had come back to me, not knowing, not recognizing the name I had chosen. I set the tablet down slowly. No panic, no anger, just focus. I pulled up the security feed. There they were, unchanged. My father pacing, arguing with staff, demanding attention like he owned the place. My mother sitting stiffly, playing the part, still judging everyone around her. Vanessa, silent, lost, the confidence gone. Reality had finally caught up to her. They were waiting for a savior, someone important, someone powerful. They had no idea. I stood up. This wasn't personal. There was a baby fighting to live. That was all that mattered. I put on my coat. Dr. Julian Hayes, Pediatric Cardiothoracic Surgery. I picked up the chart and walked out. Each step steady, controlled. Staff moved aside as I passed. Respectful, focused. I reached the consultation room, stopped at the door. Through the glass, I saw them. Heard my father complaining about service. I placed my hand on the door, took one breath, locked everything away. Then I pushed it open and walked in. The door opened without a sound, but every eye turned to me. My father, my mother, Vanessa, hope, panic, desperation. They looked at my coat, then my face, and everything broke. There was a pause, a second where their minds refused to accept what they were seeing. My mother froze, color drained from her face. Her hands trembled as she gasped, clutching her chest. My father stepped back, stunned, his confidence gone. His eyes darted between my face and the name on my coat. Vanessa covered her mouth. "Julian," she whispered, "you're the surgeon." I didn't move. "I am Dr. Hayes," I said calmly. "I've reviewed your daughter's condition." My voice pulled them back, but not to guilt, to need. My mother rushed forward, tears already falling. "Thank God," she cried. "It's you. You'll save her. We're family. We're so sorry for everything." Her tone changed instantly. "You'll give her the best care. We need updates. A private room. The best team." She reached for me, like nothing had happened, like the past could be erased. I raised my hand, stopped her. She froze, staring at me in shock. My father stepped forward, anger returning. "Lower your hand," he snapped. "That's your mother. Show some respect. We're in a crisis." I lowered it slowly, looked at all three of them, demanding, expecting, taking, just like before. But this time, everything was different. The room was silent. And for the first time in my life, I was the one in control. "Put your arms down," I said quietly. My voice was cold enough to stop her mid-step. "We're not doing this. Not today." The room went still. "We are not pretending the last 5 years didn't happen just because you're scared and standing in my hospital." My father stepped forward instantly, placing himself in front of my mother like he used to. His voice rose, sharp and familiar. "Julian, that's enough. Show your mother respect. We came all this way because your niece is dying. We are your family. You will treat us accordingly." He tried to command the room, like he always had. But here, it meant nothing. I didn't move. "I will save that baby," I said, my voice steady, controlled. "I will save her because I took an oath, because she deserves a chance." I held his gaze. "But I am doing this as a doctor, not as your daughter." Silence. Vanessa broke first, a quiet, shaking sob. She finally understood. She had no control here. None of them did. I looked at her, then back at them. "Here are the rules." My voice didn't rise. "You wait like everyone else. No private room. You get updates from the nurses, not from me. And after this surgery, you will not return to my care." I paused. "You lost that right 5 years ago." No one argued, because for the first time, they knew I meant it. My father stepped forward, furious. You can't do this, he snapped. We are your family. You owe us. I looked at him. Then I smiled. Cold. Controlled. Why do you care how I treat you? I asked softly. I'm not even a real doctor yet. Right. I still have residency. The words landed. Hard. My mother gasped, covering her mouth. My father froze. They recognized it. Their own cruelty. Turned back on them. No one spoke. They had nothing left. I turned away. Walked out. Didn't look back. I scrubbed in. Water. Soap. Focus. Everything else. Gone. In the operating room, there was only one thing that mattered. The baby. Small. Fragile. Fighting. For 8 hours. I worked. Precise. Controlled. Every movement exact. Arteries corrected. Blood flow restored. When I stepped back, her heart was steady. Strong. Alive. I removed my gloves. Done. I didn't go to them. I told the nurse to deliver the news. Then I left. Changed. Drove home. And that was it. I never saw them again. The baby recovered. They went back to their lives. And they knew, for the rest of their lives, who saved her. For years. I believed my worth depended on them. That if I tried harder, achieved more, endured enough, they would love me. But people like that never change the rules. You can give everything, and it will never be enough. Because the problem was never me. Real family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by who shows up. Family isn't defined by blood. It's defined by who shows up. The people who stand beside you, celebrate your wins, and support you without conditions. The ones who don't ask you to shrink just to make them comfortable. Walking away from toxicity isn't revenge. It's respect. It's choosing yourself. I learned that my worth doesn't come from others' approval, but from how I stand when no one stands with me. If you were in that situation, would you endure it or walk away? Did you stay until the end of this story? Thank you for listening. A single subscribe or share from you could help someone realize they deserve respect and maybe even change their life.